Hello everyone and welcome back to the Beatles Forever. Sorry for the delay in video, but I was watching videos on how video shorts might not be such a good idea for your channel, so I took them off the Beatles Forever channel and moved the shorts to a new shorts channel. So the Beatles Forever will be my regular full-length videos as usual. So recently I started to think about a group I was interested in back in the 80s. It was the Traveling Wilburys. George Harrison was in the group, and I really didn't know how it all began and when it ended. So let's find out more about this great group. The Traveling Wilburys beginning. Well, it came to light when George was being interviewed by Bob Coburn on the show Rockline in February 1988. Bob asked George what he was going to do on his follow-up to the Cloud 9 album, and George answered with, "What I'd really like to do next is an album with me and some of my mates. It's a new group I got in mind, and it's called the Traveling Wilburys. I'd like to do an album with them, and then later we can all do our own albums again." So Jeff Lynne, friend, producer, and in the band ELO, helped to produce George's Cloud 9 album. In the time making the album, they started talking about forming a group. They then asked who members might be, and George said Bob Dylan, and Jeff said Roy Orbison. And George's first thought for the name of the band was the Trembling Wilburys, but Jeff came up with the Traveling Wilburys. So during this time, Bob Dylan's career had taken a dip, according to Wikipedia.com, and Harrison and Jeff Lynne became friends with Tom Petty in October 1987 when Petty and his band, the Heartbreakers, toured Europe as Dylan's backing group. The friendship between Petty and Harrison and Jeff Lynne became stronger when he got back to Los Angeles, so George and Tom bonded over their love of 50s music. And the five musicians also bonded over a shared appreciation of the English comedy troupe Monty Python. Harrison, who had worked with members of Monty Python on various productions by his company Handmade Films since the late 1970s, and they appreciated Orbison's gift for impersonation and his ability to recite entire sketches by the troupe. So the first album was called Handle with Care. George was overseeing a film that his production company was involved with called Checking Out. Warner Brothers needed a song for a European release of his third single, This Is Love. Things got going without a plan, and George was having dinner with Jeff and Roy when George asked Jeff to help him with the song, and he also invited Roy to attend the session. According to Wikipedia, George arranged it to take place at Bob Dylan's garage studio in Malibu, since there was no professional studios available at such short notice. Petty's involvement came about when Harrison went to retrieve his guitar from Petty's house and invited him to attend also. So it sounded like everything fell into place as if it were meant to be. They even got the name of the song, Handle with Care, from a label on a box in Bob's garage. So the gang at Warner Brothers said the song was too good to be on the B-side of a record, so that's when George and Jeff decided to go ahead with their idea of forming a band. They called Tom first, and he agreed to join. Then they got in touch with Bob Dylan, and he signed up with the band too. So that night, Harrison, Lynne, and Petty drove to Anaheim to see Roy Orbison perform at the Celebrity Theater and recruited him for the group shortly before he went on stage. In Petty's description, Orbison performed an unbelievable show during which we'd punch each other and go, "He's in our band too." We were all so excited. So the first album they did was entitled Traveling Wilburys Volume 1, and they recorded the album in 10 days. So they did the recording at Dave Stewart. He was in the Eurythmics house, and all of them would sit around the kitchen table with their acoustic guitars, and they would write the songs there, record them with an accompanying drum machine, and the group recorded their vocals in another room, usually after dinner each night. The songs had a primary songwriter, but the group was creative equals. So Tom Petty said that George was the leader and manager of the group, and the album was a great success. And it got the careers of Orbison, Bob Dylan, and Tom Petty back on track. Unfortunately, Roy Orbison died of a heart attack in 1988. So Jeff Lynne was very upset because he felt Roy's voice was still in top form. Jeff felt sick about Roy's death. He added, "I was devastated for ages. Me and Roy had plans to do more together, and his voice was really in good shape. It was just so sad for that to happen." There was speculation in the press that Del Shannon or Roger McGuinn might join the Wilburys, but the remaining members never considered replacing Orbison. So after the first album, George Harrison was the big promoter of the group. He said he was waiting for the solo artists to stop their solo careers so they could get back together. So Bob Dylan, he was trying to reactivate his career. It was in 1990 the group made a second album, which they purposely named Volume 3. So Bob was on tour, so they had him sing all the leads for the songs on the album, and it made it hard to decide what songs Dylan shouldn't be on. George stepped back on the lead vocals, and he was more of a producer and more lead guitar work. So Bob Dylan said the second album had more composed songs than the first album did, and the second album was released in 1990. The album didn't do as well as the first one did. So George didn't want to go on. All the Wilburys wanted to remain together, but it was George that was backing away. While Harrison was against the idea of touring, Petty recalled, I kept getting down on my knees in front of George saying, please, it's so much money. Everyone thought it was Bob Dylan that didn't want to tour, but he was ready to do it. So George always preferred to be in the studio and not out on tour. According to Far Out magazine, the Beatles famously stopped touring in 1966 when they had outgrown the circuit. To put it simply, the band didn't have adequate venues, logistics, and technology to cope with ticket demand. The group's final tour of the United States was a disaster, and they collectively decided that their time would be better spent in the studio rather than on the road. So Tom Petty said that George never felt he needed to perform and please the masses, and he also told Tom he had no interest as a solo artist after leaving the Beatles. He did All Things Must Pass, and that was the reaction to leaving the Beatles. I had to do something. And when that went well, he made another album. So George never really had a manager or anybody to report to. And I don't think he found any interest in touring. He told me many times, according to Tom Petty, that he was very uncomfortable being the guy up front, having to sing all the songs. It was just not his idea of fun. So he was fortunate that he didn't have to tour. It allowed him to do what he wanted to do. The Traveling Wilburys were like a modern skiffle group, according to George. So he got to create a group he wanted to create, and they were successful in their time as a band and could have gone further if George had wanted it to happen. George helped to create the band, so he did things his way. He proved what a great producer and bandmate he was. The world got to see him in a band other than the Beatles, and he was successful in both, and we can enjoy the albums he had with the Beatles, his own solo albums, and the Traveling Wilburys. So what a talented guy he was. So I hope everybody enjoyed the video, and if you could give it a thumbs up, it would be greatly appreciated. It helps the channel to grow, and thank you for those who thumbs up and comment. I really appreciate it. I also hope that everybody's been having a good day, and tune in again soon for another episode of The Beatles Forever. Thank you. Bye.